December 1985, a quiet rule change at the FAA. A few paragraphs in a regulatory document. Most people didn't even notice it. But that single rule change would erase an entire category of aircraft from the sky. The three-engine jet. Gone. Extinct. Dead. Aircraft like the DC-10, the L-1011 TriStar, and the MD-11. Beautiful, powerful, capable machines. They dominated long-haul aviation for years. Airlines invested billions in them. Engineers spent decades perfecting them. The L-1011's S-duct engine intake was considered one of the greatest engineering achievements in aviation history. And then one rule change made all of it worthless overnight. Fast forward to January 2026. When was the last time you saw a three-engine passenger jet at an airport? Probably never if you're under 30 years old. They're completely extinct from passenger service. Museums and graveyards. That's where they all ended up. But here's what makes this story absolutely fascinating. The tri-jets didn't fail because they were bad aircraft. They failed because regulators changed the rules of the game, and the twin-engine jets that replaced them are now completely dominant in every corner of the aviation world. This is the story of how a single regulation erased billions of dollars in engineering and changed aviation forever. And I'm about to show you exactly why it happened. Quick question, have you ever flown on a three-engine aircraft? Drop yes in the comments if you remember what it was like, because you witnessed aviation history that's now completely extinct. Subscribe to Skyline Secrets right now because we're diving into the regulatory decisions and the engineering battles that shaped the modern aviation industry. Hit that subscribe button. This story is wild. Let me take you back to the 1950s and 60s, the early days of jet aviation. Jet engines at that time were incredible machines, but they had one massive problem. They weren't particularly reliable. Engines failed, not frequently, but often enough that it was a serious concern for the regulators at the FAA. Now imagine you're flying over the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. You're hundreds of miles from the nearest airport, hours away from any possible landing site, and one of your engines fails. If you only have two engines and one fails, you're now flying on a single engine, over the ocean, for hours. What if that remaining engine fails? You're going down into the water. That's a terrifying scenario. So in the 1950s, the FAA created a rule called ETOPS, Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. But back then, it was simpler. The rule basically said, if you want to fly routes that take you more than 60 minutes away from the nearest airport, you need at least 3 engines. 60 minutes, that was the limit. That rule created an entire category of aircraft, the tri-jets. Boeing designed the 727 with 3 engines. It became one of the most successful aircraft ever built. Over 1,800 were produced. McDonnell Douglas created the DC-10 with 3 engines for long-haul routes. Lockheed built the L-1011 TriStar, arguably the most advanced tri-jet ever made. These aircraft had an interesting problem to solve. Where do you put the third engine? The 727 put all 3 engines at the tail, 2 on the sides, 1 in the center of the fuselage feeding through an S-duct. The DC-10 put 2 engines under the wings and 1 at the base of the vertical stabilizer. The L-1011 did something similar, but with a more sophisticated S-duct design that fed the center engine. Airlines loved these tri-jets. The extra engine meant safety over the oceans. If 1 engine failed, you still had 2 more. The redundancy was reassuring for both the airlines and the passengers. By the 1970s and early 1980s, tri-jets were everywhere. They dominated long-haul international aviation, routes across the Atlantic, across the Pacific, the Middle East to Europe, South America to North America. If it was a long over-water route, you were probably flying on a tri-jet. Here's a question for you. Do you think 3 engines made flights feel safer back then? Let me know in the comments. But then everything changed, and it started with engines getting dramatically better. By the early 1980s, jet engine technology had made enormous leaps forward. The engines that powered the Boeing 747 in 1970 were incredibly advanced for their time. But the engines being developed for the Boeing 767 in the early 1980s were in a completely different league. Reliability improved by orders of magnitude. Pratt & Whitney, General Electric, and Rolls-Royce were competing fiercely to build the most reliable engines in history. And they succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Modern turbofan engines were achieving reliability rates that seemed impossible just a decade earlier. Engine failures became extremely rare events. Not unheard of, but rare enough that the old 60-minute rule started to look overly conservative. Boeing saw an opportunity that would change everything. They were developing the 767, a twin-engine wide-body aircraft. It was perfect for medium to long-haul routes, efficient, modern, capable. But there was one massive problem: the ETOPS rule. The 767 could only fly routes that kept it within 60 minutes of an airport. That eliminated most transatlantic routes, most trans-Pacific routes, basically all the most profitable long-haul international flying. Boeing looked at the engine reliability data and made an aggressive pitch to the FAA. These new engines are so reliable that twin-engine aircraft should be allowed to fly the same routes as trijets. Change the ETOPS rules. The FAA was skeptical at first. This was a massive change. Decades of aviation safety policy were built around the assumption that you needed at least 3 engines for long overwater routes. But the data was undeniable. The new generation of turbofan engines had reliability rates above 99.9%. Engine failures were becoming statistical anomalies, and when they did happen, modern twin-engine aircraft could easily fly for hours on a single engine. In December 1985, the FAA made the historic decision. They approved ETOPS 120 for the Boeing 767. That meant the 767 could now fly routes that took it up to 120 minutes away from the nearest airport. That one decision changed everything. Absolutely everything. Quick question: if you were making this decision, would you have approved it? Drop yes or no below. Let me show you exactly what this rule change meant for the trijets. Before ETOPS 120, airlines had no choice. If you wanted to fly from New York to London, you needed at least 3 engines. So you bought DC-10s, L-1011s, or 747s. After ETOPS 120, you suddenly had another option: the Boeing 767, a twin-engine aircraft that burned significantly less fuel, required less maintenance, and could fly the exact same routes. Do the math with me. A DC-10 has 3 engines, 3 engines to maintain, 3 engines burning fuel, 3 engines requiring spare parts and specialist mechanics. A 767 has 2 engines, 2 engines to maintain, 2 engines burning fuel, 2 engines requiring parts. The cost difference was massive. Airlines could save millions per year per aircraft by operating twins instead of trijets. But it gets worse for the trijets. The 767 wasn't just cheaper to operate, it was also more efficient per seat. Modern engines, better aerodynamics, advanced materials. The 767 could carry roughly the same number of passengers as a DC-10 or L-1011, but burned 25 to 30% less fuel doing it. Within just a few years, the writing was on the wall. Trijets were doomed. ETOPS continued to expand. ETOPS 180 in 1988. That meant twin-engine aircraft could now fly up to 180 minutes from the nearest airport. That opened up even more routes. Eventually, ETOPS 330 and beyond. Twins could fly anywhere on the planet. By the early 1990s, airlines stopped ordering trijets entirely. The DC-10 production ended in 1989. The L-1011 production ended in 1984. McDonnell Douglas tried to save the concept with the MD-11, an updated DC-10, but it was too late. Only 200 were built. Meanwhile, Boeing was selling 767s by the hundreds, and they followed it up with the 777 in 1995, an even larger twin-engine wide-body. Airbus launched the A330, another twin-engine wide-body. These aircraft completely took over the long-haul market. The trijets that once dominated international aviation were being retired rapidly. By 2000, most major airlines had phased them out of passenger service. By 2010, they were extremely rare. By 2020, essentially extinct from passenger flying. In January 2026, you will not find a single 3-engine passenger jet in scheduled commercial service anywhere in the world. 0. They're all gone, scrapped, converted to freighters, or sitting in museums. A question for you: do you think the airlines made the right choice retiring these aircraft? Tell me what you think. Let me tell you about the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, because this aircraft deserves to be remembered as one of the greatest engineering achievements in aviation history. The L-1011 first flew in 1970. Lockheed designed it to compete against the DC-10 in the trijet market. But Lockheed didn't just want to compete, they wanted to build the most advanced airliner ever created. The centerpiece of the L-1011's design was the S-duct. The center engine was mounted inside the tail of the aircraft, but how do you get air from the front of the plane to an engine buried in the tail? Lockheed's solution was an S-shaped duct that snaked through the fuselage. The air entered at the base of the vertical stabilizer, curved smoothly through an S shape, and fed into the engine mounted in the tail cone. The engineering required to make this work was absolutely mind-blowing. The S-duct had to deliver smooth, consistent airflow to the engine under all conditions: takeoff, cruise, landing, turbulence, crosswinds. Any disruption to the airflow could cause the engine to surge or stall. Lockheed spent years perfecting the duct design. The result was a masterpiece. The L-1011's S-duct delivered better airflow than anyone thought possible. The center engine operated more efficiently than the wing-mounted engines in many flight conditions. But the L-1011 had other innovations too. It was the first wide-body with an auto-land system that could land the aircraft in zero visibility conditions. The first with a direct lift control system that improved ride quality. The flight control systems were a generation ahead of anything else flying. Airlines that operated the L-1011 loved it. Pilots called it the best handling wide-body ever built. Passengers appreciated the quiet cabin and smooth ride. Eastern Airlines, Delta, TWA, they all operated large L-1011 fleets. But here's the tragedy. All that engineering brilliance became worthless the moment ETOPS rules changed. The airlines didn't care how advanced the S-duct was. They didn't care about the auto-land system. They cared about operating costs. And the L-1011 simply couldn't compete economically against twin-engine aircraft. Lockheed built only 250 L-1011s before production ended in 1984. Compare that to over 1,100 Boeing 767s or over 600 Boeing 777s. The most advanced trijet ever built was also one of the shortest lived. By 2001, the last L-1011 was retired from passenger service. Today, you can find a few in museums, but most were scrapped. All that engineering genius melted down and recycled. What do you think? Should aviation museums have preserved more of these engineering marvels? Share your thoughts. Let me show you what the aviation world looks like in January 2026 after the trijets disappeared. Twin-engine aircraft absolutely dominate every segment of commercial aviation. Short haul, the 737 and the A320 family. Medium haul, the 737 MAX, the A321, the 767. Long haul, the 787, the A350, the 777, the A330. Four-engine aircraft are also nearly extinct. The 747 production ended in 2023. The A380 production ended in 2021. Only a few airlines still operate them, and they're rapidly being retired. The entire industry has converged on twin-engine efficiency, and the results are remarkable. Modern twin-engine aircraft like the 787 and the A350 are achieving fuel efficiency that would have seemed impossible in the trijet era. The 787 burns about 20% less fuel than the aircraft it replaced. That's massive when you multiply it across thousands of flights per year. The Boeing 777X, when it finally enters service, will carry over 400 passengers with just 2 engines. Routes that once required a 747 with 4 engines can now be flown with a twin, more efficiently, more profitably. But here's what's really interesting. The ETOPS rules keep expanding. ETOPS 370 is now approved for some aircraft. That means they can fly up to 370 minutes, over 6 hours, away from the nearest airport on one engine. Airlines are using this capability to open routes that were previously impossible. Direct flights from smaller cities to international destinations, routes that bypass traditional hubs, point-to-point long-haul flying that wouldn't have been possible in the trijet era. The economics are compelling. Twin-engine aircraft are cheaper to buy, cheaper to maintain, cheaper to operate, and more efficient. There's simply no reason to build 3-engine aircraft anymore. So what can we learn from the death of the trijets? First, regulations shaped the industry more than most people realize. The ETOPS rules didn't just allow twin-engine aircraft to fly longer routes, they fundamentally changed the economics of aircraft design. Once the rules changed, trijets became obsolete overnight. Second, efficiency always wins in the long run. The trijets weren't bad aircraft. The L-1011 was arguably the most advanced airliner of its era, but they couldn't compete economically against more efficient twins. In commercial aviation, the most efficient solution always dominates eventually. Third, technology changes everything. The ETOPS rule changes only happened because engine technology improved dramatically. Without that reliability improvement, twin-engine long-haul flying would have been too risky. Technology enabled the regulatory change, which enabled the market shift. Fourth, billions in engineering investment can become worthless surprisingly quickly. Lockheed invested enormous resources developing the L-1011's advanced systems. It was all cutting-edge technology, but when the market shifted to twins, that investment lost most of its value. The tri-jet era lasted roughly 30 years, from the late 1960s to the late 1990s. That's not a very long time in aviation history, and now it's completely over. The aircraft that once dominated international flying are extinct. So here we are in 2026. The three-engine jet is completely extinct from passenger aviation. A regulatory change in 1985 started a revolution that erased an entire aircraft category from the sky. The DC-10, the L-1011, the MD-11, they're all gone. Engineering marvels like the S-Duct are now just historical curiosities, museums pieces, stories that old pilots tell. The twin-engine aircraft won completely. They're more efficient, more economical, more capable than anyone imagined possible when the ETOPS rules first changed. But here's my final question for you. Do you think we lost something when the tri-jets disappeared? Was there value in the redundancy of three engines? Or was this simply progress and efficiency winning like it always does? Drop your answer in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious what you think about this, and if this deep dive into aviation history opened your eyes to how regulations and technology shape the industry. You absolutely need to subscribe to Skyline Secrets right now. We're uncovering the regulatory decisions, the engineering battles, and the market forces that transformed aviation into what we see today. Hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell. Next week, why did Airbus bet the entire company on the A380? The behind-the-scenes story of the biggest gamble in aviation history will shock you. See you in the next investigation.